Welcome to Final Cut Pro 10 Core Training. Whether you're new to digital video editing or transitioning from another editing application, this training was designed to give you the foundation you need for editing and delivering any video project you have in mind. There are no prerequisites for this training. I start from the ground up and keep things simple by explaining exactly what you need to know at every stage of the editing process. While much has been said of Final Cut Pro 10's unconventional editing approach, it is by far the easiest editing software to learn, while at the same time boasting tools and features that are light years ahead of any other editing system. If you take the time to watch this tutorial in its entirety and follow along with the lessons using the provided media, I can assure you that in a very short time, you'll be telling your stories with confidence. I look forward to your feedback, and thanks for watching. After downloading Final Cut Pro 10 from the App Store and installing it, click the Launchpad icon in the dock. Then locate the Final Cut Pro 10 icon and click once on it to launch the app. A welcome screen appears listing the new features in this release. Click Continue to dismiss the window. Final Cut Pro launches as a single window, taking up all or most of your display. To resize the window, drag in the lower right corner of the window. To make the window fit your display resolution, choose Zoom from the window menu. When opening Final Cut Pro for the first time, the window will be empty until you import footage and create projects. You'll be doing this in the next several lessons. In order to better showcase the interface, I'm going to show you what Final Cut Pro looks like with a fully populated media library and a completed project. The most noticeable change from the previous version is the new flat look of the UI, with redesigned buttons and a darker window so that maximum focus is on your content. The guiding design principle behind the new look is that the UI should be in the background visually, while your media is in the foreground. In terms of workflow, the interface can be separated into three areas of focus: organizing, playback, and editing. The Libraries pane in the upper left is the organizational component of the interface. In this area, you create libraries to store and manage events. Events are like folders that contain clips and projects. Selecting an event reveals its contents in the event browser directly to the right. There are two other buttons that show sidebars of additional content. By showing the Photos and Audio sidebar, you'll see media files that can be accessed directly from familiar Mac applications, like Photos, Logic Pro, and iTunes. Clicking the Titles and Generators button will give you access to a wide assortment of factory-installed titles and animated backgrounds. You view your clips by moving your pointer over a clip, what Final Cut Pro calls skimming. As you skim, the video appears in the viewer to the right. You can also make selections from your clips, rate them, and keyword tag them in preparation for adding them to a project. Projects, which also appear inside events, are used to edit and construct your movies. You can think of projects as a record of all your editorial work. Projects cannot be skimmed, but they can be opened into the timeline by double-clicking on a project thumbnail. The timeline is where you add clips, arrange and edit your clips, add titles and effects, and ultimately share your movie. You can skim and play back the timeline, and the video will appear in the viewer. Any changes you make in Final Cut Pro is recorded into a real-time database. This means you never have to save your work. Even if the app quits unexpectedly, or you quit Final Cut Pro, the next time you open it, you'll be right where you left off. Final Cut Pro 10 also has an unlimited number of undos. As with most Mac apps, Command-Z is the shortcut for going back a step. You can press Command-Z as many times as you like to return your project to your preferred state. The light gray bar that separates the user interface is called the toolbar. The buttons that reside here are all related to specific editing functions as you work in the timeline. At the far left is the Timeline Index button that reveals a pane where you can view clips, keywords, and other metadata related to the currently open project. Moving to the right, there are four buttons that control how clips from the browser are edited into the timeline. The arrow to the immediate right is the Select tool for trimming and making other adjustments to clips in the timeline. Clicking it reveals even more editing tools. The letter to the right of each tool is the keyboard shortcut to call up a particular tool. Moving to the far right side of the toolbar are buttons for controlling various editing modes, such as skimming, audio skimming, soloing, and snapping, all of which you'll be working with in the lessons on editing. The Film Strip button brings up a clip appearance window, allowing you to change the clip height and the amount of timeline zooming, among other things. If you want to apply effects and/or transitions to clips in your timeline, these items can be revealed by clicking either the Effects Browser button or the Transition Browser button. As you're working, you can also hide or reveal various panes, depending on what you need to focus on. For example, during the organization stage, you may not want to see the timeline. Clicking this middle button in the upper toolbar will hide it, which maximizes the window real estate for organizing all your media. During the editing stage, you may only want to see your viewer in timeline, and clicking this button hides the library and browser panes. Clicking on this button opens the inspector. When a clip is selected from either the browser or timeline, the inspector gives you options for making changes to it, like scaling, repositioning, or working with effects. To make the inspector appear full height, double-click the bar at the top. Placing your mouse pointer at the boundary between any of these areas will reveal a resize pointer where you can change the spatial relationships between these panes, giving more screen real estate to either the library, viewer, or timeline if needed. To return the window layout to the default, go to the Window menu and choose Workspaces Default. There's a few other buttons in the upper toolbar related to importing, organizing, monitoring background tasks, and sharing your work. We'll cover these functions in the lessons for which they're most relevant. If you hover your mouse pointer over any button, a gray tooltip will appear, reminding you of the button's function, along with its associated keyboard shortcut to call it up. The last item we'll look at is Final Cut Pro's User Preferences. From the Final Cut Pro menu, choose Preferences, or use the keyboard shortcut Command-. At first glance, the Preferences window may appear alarmingly minimal compared to other editing applications. This is by design. Where most other editing applications provide page after page of user customizable settings, Apple keeps things simple by providing only the essential controls needed to handle the editing, playback, importing, and sharing of your media. For example, by clicking the Import button, you're presented with options for where and how your media will be stored, along with options for analyzing your media during import. Clicking the Destinations button will present you with options for sharing your media. What's important to understand about these preferences is that they determine Final Cut Pro's default functionality as it relates to each category. As we go through the tutorial, I'll show you under what circumstance it makes sense to change these default preferences. So in the lessons on editing and effects, for example, you'll learn when it's appropriate to change the playback preferences, such as turning off background rendering, or changing the pre-roll duration of your movie during playback. In the next lesson, you'll learn how to use Final Cut Pro's command editor to quickly locate commands and keyboard shortcuts for improving your speed and efficiency.